Servus Männer, it's Red Pill Germany again. In today's update, I want to inform you about the current situation in Germany. I will combine some recent events, some recent news, and put it into perspective embedded into the general situation that I was covering anyway so far. And today's topic will be that the system, the regime in Germany, they are already preparing for what's coming in autumn and winter. They are already putting out these. You can really notice that when you read it. Nowadays, my trigger already goes off when I see the headlines. They're using these set phrases, these speech codes, and you read them then in every newspaper in the same way. And these are given out by the state and by the mainstream media. That is, of course, not to be seen as a separate entity. The mainstream media, mainstream news outlet, and the government, they are basically the same thing, or they're maybe a different department in the same organization. You can think of it as that. They are propaganda departments. Anyway, so what do I mean? I mean that everything that will happen in winter, everything that is in any way close to some form of protest, some sort of, voicing disagreement or discontent with the current situation and with the government, is framed already preemptively right now in the middle of August. It is framed already as the N-word. And no, not this African N-word. No, I mean the 1930s Germany N-word, the not so international socialists. Every form of discontent, every form of protest or disagreeing with the state, with the government, with these measures is already preemptively framed as such, because they are saying now, there are headlines that the state and law enforcement and security and intelligence agencies, they have indications and they have reason to believe that there will be some kind of right-wing action, or some kind of events will be planned, and they try to use the current crisis, or crises I should say. Well, actually, when I come to think about it, singular. No, because it's one crisis. It is basically one idea that they want to crash our economy. They want to make everyone unemployed and dependent on the state. And that is planned. And they just have different work packages within that project, within that one big manufactured crisis. And if it is a health-related thing, or if it's just, energy or supply chains, these are all just different work packages, but the project is the same. They are not different projects. The plan is to crash the world economy, and so they can, whatever you want to call it, build back worse or something like that. Anyway, so what you see right now in Germany, as I said, is that any form of protest that is conceivable or that is to be expected is already described and characterized, even though it hasn't even happened yet, as a right-wing takeover that must be fought and met with the utmost resistance, and every tool in the arsenal of the state must be used so that these dangerous radicals cannot destroy our democracy. Yeah, right, democracy. Right. I have heard better jokes in my life before. But anyway, so that is one thing. And then there is another very interesting finding that I want to present to you. I want to paraphrase it. I want to put the link to the German article in the first comment, in the pinned comment down below. And it is basically an interview with a police officer or some law enforcement officer who is in the process, I think, of leaving active duty because he cannot really take it anymore. And what he describes is from the Berlin, from the city of Berlin, and what he sees, what kind of troublesome and questionable events and tendencies he can see in Berlin law enforcement. What he says and what he experienced during the last 2 years is as follows. He said that there are some units, and this is maybe not a recent development, can generally be said about law enforcement. There are some units in there that are basically very blunt tools. They are young, fit, very, very strong, and very, very aggressive and well-trained men who can use sticks and several other objects and tools very well, and they, when they get the when they get the order to strike, then they don't care what's in front of them. This is literally what he says. They just want to destroy. And yeah, you might think that Europe is weak and soft and all that stuff. And for the most part, that's true. And he doesn't mean or he doesn't describe the entire body of Berlin law enforcement like that. He said there are some select trains or units within these offices that are trained like that, that behave like that operate like that. So it is a very special force. Yeah, and he said that whenever there was an actual threat to public order, like extreme vandalism or very, very aggressive and violent demonstrations where they, where looting took place or where local businesses were attacked. I mean, we didn't have it on the order of magnitude like we had that with BLM in the States, but it does happen here and there in Hamburg and in Berlin and these places. And whenever that happened, he said that these units were pulled back. Yeah. And normal law enforcement had to face them, and they were de-escalating, even though there were actual crimes being committed by those criminals on the street, left-wing criminals, that is, of course. And in every case, because you need to understand that the local, the governors and the mayors, the local politicians, they control the state prosecutors, the DAs or whatever, we call them Staatsanwalt, so the prosecutors, they control them, and they also control the police chief and so on. Yeah, I just told you about these in a previous video about the different connections that the mainstream or public media has in Germany with the health sector and with the police chief. They're all one big clique, one big clan or mafia. And anyway, so in all these cases, these very aggressive, very capable, and very, how should I say, having no scruples, these kind of units were pulled back. But whenever there was an actually peaceful protest in the last 2 years, I covered all these things where they were afraid that our constitution is being violated and all these restrictions we had were against our basic law, and it's basically and in many cases afterwards it was admitted, this was not legal, but we did it anyway, right? And when there was justified protest against that, they immediately pulled these very aggressive law enforcement units to the front, and they told them, destroy, get in there and just destroy. And they did that, and they didn't care if it was a 60-year-old lady or some mommy with a baby carriage in front of them. They did go in there, and they did, in fact, destroy everything that was in their path. And people actually lost their lives. That is documented, and people lost their eyesight and all these cruel things. But and all these protesters were of course called somehow right-wing and extremist and dangerous. Even they were just standing there holding signs. I mean, I don't want to repeat all that. I covered all that in these videos over the last 2 years. It is very well documented. But these local politicians made sure that these very aggressive units were put in the front, and they were given a very clear order. And I'm just telling you guys, this police officer, he said, in the beginning, I joined the force because I thought that we are protecting the weak from the strong, or we protect the maybe or the innocent from the criminals and stuff. A very naive concepts, but this is of course how it is intended to be, or how we're taught in school that the system works. But then he had to find out that reality looks quite different, and now he can't do it anymore. Yeah, and yeah, I just thought this finding was very interesting. If you can speak German, just read it for yourself, or if you can read and understand German. And if not, you can maybe use a translator tool. I just found it, especially in light of recent events, I found it very interesting, and I think it tells us pretty much what is about to come in in autumn and winter. And it also means that, as I said, the system, the regime is preparing already to meet any form of protest with direct violence, just like it was in the Soviet Union or the GDR when the tanks rolled in when the workers were protesting back then. Same thing. And this year especially, as I said, there are these multiple crises that are actually just different work packages, as I said, in one big crisis. And people have reason to complain. Yeah, not only will we have these ridiculous illegal health restrictions again, we also face gigantic inflation, and we also face a collapsing economy potentially, and huge unemployment because of an energy crisis. And that also means that maybe people's homes are cold in winter and they can't afford food, and so on and so on. I mean, maybe it's not going to be that bad, but we don't know that yet. And it might be that people get really pissed, and this is why the regime is already preparing, but they're not preparing in a way that they ask, how can we alleviate these problems? How can we help the people that it doesn't come to the worst? No, they're preparing by already framing that as right wing and extremist, so that they can later just let loose the dogs of, well, war, or or whatever you call these regime actions against peaceful protesters. Yeah, that they can put these, as I said, these police forces in the front lines and just tell them, these 2,000 people down there, go crush, destroy. And of course they will use also water cannons and these things again, and they will just crush everything. And one thing that people might be able to do, that is this flash mob kind of thing, or a decentralized protest like we did already last year. I joined a couple of those, I told you, where people just more or less arbitrarily show up at a certain day around a certain time, and they just take walks, and many different groups walk in different directions. It's very hard for the authorities to keep track of that, because it's not one centralized thing that you can target easily, and people that you can then of course corner. And that was the thing I should add. Maybe you missed that, but I want to add just at the end that this is exactly what they did. Like, they cornered them, they blocked the way, and they concentrated them. So they made sure with these blockades that the people get squeezed into a very narrow space. And then they said, oh, you don't keep the distance, social distancing. And then they started beating them. So this was, it's just insane. It's just so evil. Like, if you first you squeeze the people together, and then you accuse them of not keeping these social distancing rules. I mean, this is literally what they did. Yeah. And when you have a decentralized protest with different groups in different places shouting things here and there, you can't do that easily, and this overwhelms already the authorities. And the key was also not to focus just on the big cities, but also have these protests in villages, in small towns all over the districts, and then there is not enough law enforcement to keep track of that. Then you might be able to control the center of a large city, but you can't control 500 villages with one district's law enforcement. Yeah, that's just not going to work. And that's what people will probably do again in winter. Well, let's see what happens. If I'm still around, I will cover that for you, of course. Servus, Kameraden.